Life. Challenging, precious, limited. Death can rip away everything we know, everything we cared about and loved. How can I live without this person? Why can't I get out of bed or stop thinking about what could have been or should be now? Why can't I accept this? How can I stop the pain? Help is here. MedCircle's course on grief, Beyond Bereavement, follows a 6-step framework towards transformative healing. You'll receive expert advice and learn science-backed techniques to help you process this grief and live more fully. You'll be provided with actionable steps and supportive resources. You'll also have live access to some of the best minds in mental health, the MedCircle doctors. And perhaps most importantly, you'll join a supportive community of like-minded individuals who are all going through something similar. Breathe again, find joy again, live again. Visit MedCircle.com to start your healing journey today. Hi there, I'm Kyle Kittleson with MedCircle, and as you saw, our course Beyond Bereavement is now live. You can access that course by visiting MedCircle.com or visit the link in the description below this video. Happy Friday if you're watching this live. I am very excited. It's an exciting day here at MedCircle because we've been working truly about all year creating this course, and today is the first day you can get it. We've already had many MedCircle members enroll in the course. Of course, if you're a MedCircle member, there is a nice little discount for you on that course. The course, just to reiterate, does follow a 6-step process. And I like people to know that, because I don't want people to think, oh, I'm going to sign up for a course and then it's all up to me. We're going to hold your hand through it. We're going to take you step by step, lesson through lesson at your pace with lots of supportive resources. There's a digital workbook that accompanies the course. There's, of course, the community of other people who are grieving, who are also taking the course. We have live office hours and weekly workshops where you can get your questions answered by doctors. And we also have jammed it packed full of actionable science-backed techniques for you to manage stress and emotions and all of the other whirlwind that comes with grief. You know, Dr. Judy said in the course a few times, grief is a universal experience. We've all grieved. We all will likely grieve again in our lives. And so we might as well get educated on the topic and really, really understand it. No better person to help us understand it than triple board certified forensic and neuropsychologist, Dr. Judy Ho. Dr. Judy, welcome to our YouTube channel.
Hi. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to be here. It's so cool that we're on launch day.
Yeah, it is so exciting. And thank you all who are blowing up the chat. And thank you all who have liked this video. Yesterday, I went live too, and you guys really liked that video. I mean, meaning you pushed the button. Hopefully you liked it too, but you pushed the little button. So if you push the little thumbs up button here, I'm saying thank you. Thank you for supporting us. That's very nice of you. Dr. Judy, what was your, it's interesting for me to even ask this question because when we filmed the course on grief, it had heavy moments, but it also had some lighthearted moments. What was your most memorable or favorite moment of creating the course on grief?
Well, it was interesting because when we filmed the course, I had just experienced several losses in my own life over the last couple of months, basically. So it was kind of interesting that it was such a timely topic to reflect upon. And it actually felt really good going through my own grief process to be able to talk about it in a way that hopefully helps other people. You know, that I think just is a memorable moment for me, reflecting on the several losses that I had, which I know I talked about in the actual filming. And it was just so difficult because I felt like, well, this is part of why it's so universal. Like, on the one hand, I'm trying to help people through grief, and on the other hand, I was dealing with it myself in that exact moment, and
Yeah.
that was memorable for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think people who take this course are going to really see the value in your sharing your own experiences with grief. And I experienced my own experience with grief. I've shared that as well. So I think having that, knowing and seeing and hearing the universality of it
Yeah.
all, I think is really helpful in the course. I, you're not to speak for you, Dr. Judy, but I lost my grandmother when I was 16. You lost your grandmother when you were in your 20s,
No, in my 30s.
in your
Yeah.
30s. Yeah,
I
more
was
recent.
35 or 36. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that was, you said that was one of your big losses. How, do you find, because I do, that this grief of a loss that's happened years ago creeps up seemingly out of nowhere, where I can just be going throughout my day and then I get hit with this bombshell of grief? Does that happen to you?
Yeah, definitely. It's not really like you can know what would trigger it either. Sometimes it just happens out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes I know why. Like, maybe I'm having a difficult moment in my life, and my grandmother was my person,
Yeah.
and it just makes me miss her so much that she's not there so that I can talk to her or just get a hug. Like, she doesn't even have to give me advice. I'm not even sure if she ever really gave me advice per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just nice to be able to hug her and know that she's there. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. So sometimes I think there's an identifiable trigger, and other times there's not. And you can just all of a sudden have a huge wave of emotion about it.
Yeah. Sometimes when I smell the perfume Angel, and I don't know who makes it, but I know the name of the perfume Angel. If I smell that on someone, I have to take a step back, because that is what it just reminds me of my mother. That smell is takes me right back there.
Mhm.
I'd love to show this clip from the course on how grief can really hit you out of nowhere, even years later. Let's take a look at this.
Grief and loss feelings can come up at any time. It can come up years and decades after you lost the person. You can go several months without thinking about it and all of a sudden have a really intense emotion. And there is no right way to grieve, and there's no right timeline to grieve. So understanding the triggers is really helpful, because then you can be prepared, especially if you're in a place where you can't 100% devote your time and energy to really processing the grief and loss emotions that just came up.
As we move through the grief process, we are likely to run into triggering moments or events. What do we do when these happen, and how do we determine what coping strategies we should use? Here to guide us through this lesson is Dr. Judy.
A variety of triggers can come up unexpectedly, as it seems, when we're going through grief. Or maybe you thought that you've been processing your grief in a very effective way, and all of a sudden something will pop up and you have really intense emotions again. And this is because there are a variety of different triggers that can come up that remind you of your loss. They can be internal or external triggers. Internal triggers are thoughts that you have about the person, a memory that gets evoked, sometimes because you're reminded of the person when you're walking through a special place that you guys used to share, or perhaps even socially being prompted about this person because somebody is having a conversation that reminds you of the person that you lost. So as you can see, oftentimes there's a combination of both an internal process that's triggering the loss, or an external process where it's something in your environment. It's about other people, what they're talking about. Another type of external trigger is anniversaries or special dates that you shared with this person, on their birthday, on the anniversary of their death. These are the kinds of things where maybe it's a little bit more expected that you might have a certain reaction, but sometimes the level of reaction that you have can still take you by surprise. And I think one of the things that I've learned most personally, and also what I do to educate my patients as we talk about grief, is that you should always learn to essentially expect the unexpected. Grief and loss feelings can come up at any time. It can come up years and decades after you lost the person. You can go several months without thinking about it and all of a sudden have a really intense emotion. And there is no right way to grieve, and there's no right timeline to grieve. So understanding the triggers is really helpful because then you can be prepared, especially if you're in a place where you can't 100% devote your time and energy to really processing the grief and loss emotions that just came up. So it'd be helpful to have essentially a toolbox of things that you can do when you find yourself being unexpectedly triggered. And these things can help you in the moment just to move through those difficult feelings and thoughts so that you can function, so that you can attend to the things that you need to attend to in the moment. And I think that these can be really, really quick types of coping strategies. They can be deep breathing. They can be a brief moment of practical mindfulness. It can be brief strategies for grounding. There's a lot of different things that you can do in the moment just to try to get a hold of those intense feelings and to be able to move through that distress and still do what you need to do at that time.
Taking Dr. Judy's guidance and some of those example questions she has mentioned throughout this step, one really cool exercise is to do a timed journal, meaning take 7 minutes and journal about any thoughts or feelings that come up when pondering these questions or going through these exercises. You can review your journal privately or share it with your friend or even share it publicly in the MedCircle community. This type of free-flowing thought often reveals some new aha moments for us, and I'll be excited to hear how this free journaling exercise works for you. In lesson 4, we're going to take all of the retrospection, all of the introspection, and all of the ways we're now managing triggers and use that to help explore what our future life can look like. That will be next in lesson 4. Again, if you're interested in that course, you can use the link in the description of this video or visit MedCircle.com. It is available for the first time ever today. So come join already the many members who have signed up for the course over at MedCircle. Dr. Judy, so much about grief for people is properly honoring their loved one. And I think there's a lot of ways to do that. One, I'm just going to share a quick story for me. I notoriously don't have many physical items in my house or in my environment that honors or, my mother. For example, I don't have a picture of her hanging up anywhere. There's one in the garage actually, but there's nowhere else because that is too triggering for me. Like if I see her, I get too sad. However, there is a painting that my mother painted and I have that hanging up, something that she created. So in that way, I do honor her. But how do we really look at that line between honoring this person that I loved, who is now gone, but also taking care of myself and knowing, well, here's what I can handle and here's what I can't?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question, and it's a type of psychological flexibility that you know what kind of emotions to process when you might have more time, and also understanding your own triggers and applying different coping strategies at different times. I know that it can be helpful for people to sometimes set aside a day or a time in the year where they do more of that remembrance, and it's very purposeful. They usually do it in a community. It's not just by themselves because obviously the isolation can be really difficult. So perhaps, every year on that person's birthday, that's when you do something really special. You go to their favorite restaurant, you share stories about them, and you know that that's going to be essentially a day that is a beautiful memorial of the person. Sometimes you might think, well, I really want to look at those photos now. I just miss her and I want to look at it. And then you have this really extreme emotional reaction. And as I just said in the video, maybe you're at work, so you really can't finish processing it right then and there. In that moment, it is important to use a technique like distraction so that you can just get the day finished in the way that you want to. and then to deal with the rest of the processing maybe later that night or that weekend. And so I do think that there's a fine line sometimes, and sometimes we don't know until we do it, right? We think, oh, I can handle looking at those photos, and I really want to, and then all of a sudden you're crying so much and you didn't realize that was going to happen. But be gentle to yourself. Grief is not linear, and grief is not necessarily always logical.
Yeah. In our chat, Cheryl says, we love them, not loved them. Love never dies. She also says, grief is love with nowhere to go. I had
Mhm.
not heard that phrase, Cheryl. Thank you for sharing those. Um, you know, I think we're going to talk about how creating different forms of intimacy and new relationships can help through the grief process. And we have some techniques, but I want to, before we go to that technique, I want everyone to know that there are so many techniques and actionable strategies that Dr. Judy provided in this course that I stopped counting them. I was like, I got to count so I can tell people, oh, there's 120. I just stopped counting because I was like, there's just so many. And the reason there's so many is because we all know what works for me might not work for you, and what works for you may or may not work for me. And so the key here, y'all, is if you're in that grieving, if you're grieving and you're looking for answers, you're looking for relief, or you're looking for clarity, we have a lot of things for you to try, but you got to try them. You got to try them out. And even if you think, oh, that's not going to work for me, or that sounds silly, or, maybe that'd work for some people, but it's not going to work for me. Okay, maybe not. But we don't know until you just go try. And you can try with any mindset you want. I just ask that you try it. And so let's go to one of these quick techniques that Dr. Judy provides in the course. Let's take a look at one right now.
If you're missing connection in your life and feeling a little lonely, why not try cultivating the 5 forms of intimacy with different people in your life that make a difference to you? There are actually 5 forms of intimacy, including physical, emotional, intellectual, experiential, and spiritual. This may mean that different people in your life meet these different areas of intimacy for you. You may have a friend who you have activities that you like to share. So that's an experiential intimacy moment that you can build with this person. You may have another person who you like to talk about big topics about the universe, about higher beings, about God. If that's you, there's somebody that you can meet that spiritual intimacy connection with. But I challenge you to think about these 5 forms of intimacy and think about at least one person who you can cultivate a closer connection with using that specific category of intimacy.
What would you say, Dr. Judy, for somebody who goes, okay, that's real nice, but I am so stuck in the middle of my grief that at this moment, I do not feel like I will find joy and happiness again? What's your response to that person?
I think that sometimes we talk ourselves out of even experiencing momentary happiness. And
Mm,
sometimes we feel guilty if we do. Like if you're in a deep sense of grieving, you laugh. You feel bad that you laughed at a joke that
right.
somebody said or something that you watched in a movie. And I would say that it's a totally understandable feeling to feel like I can never feel that joy again, or at least at the very least, I don't feel that joy right now in this moment. But also, it's okay to say that you don't have to be happy the whole time, the whole day, or
Yeah.
the entire hour. But it is okay just to have a momentary blip of a positive sensation and really allow yourself to be able to do that, because every single person is capable of that no matter how deep your grief is.
Yeah, I felt that. I felt that guilt when my mom died, and
Mhm.
I would smile at something or laugh. I'd go, "What? You can't be smiling or laughing right now. Your mom is literally dead."
Mm.
But it eventually kind of evens out. The more those little things happen, the more comfortable it becomes, and then all of a sudden you're back in your new norm. And I want to talk about the new norm. People always say that. They go, "Well, it's never going to be the same. You just have to find your new norm." For people who that's a block for them because they are so in love with what was, it's hard
Mhm.
for them to accept a new norm. What would your advice be for people struggling to accept the new norm?
Yeah, I think that that's, again, a very common experience of, well, things will never be the same. And, you're absolutely right, things will never be the same.
Mhm.
But that new normal doesn't have to be so treacherous every single day. And I think part of the grief, why it's so hard for all of us too, is that we're all grappling with our own existential questions. And when somebody so
Mm.
close to us dies, it takes away that illusion that maybe we're just going to live forever. You know, that's a much easier concept to grasp when you're younger and when you haven't experienced as much grief. But as you get older and people really close to you pass away, and sometimes for really inexplicable reasons, or you didn't have time to really process it, I think that it's on top of that that you're also dealing with your own existential crisis, if you will, and that's just a part of life. Uh,
Mhm.
Life is going to be ever changing, and of course, it feels so comforting for your brain when everything can stay the same, but it can't. And so, the ways to embrace this new normal is to think about, well, is there any opportunity here that is different than what I've experienced in the past? Uh,
Mm.
is this an opportunity for me to grow and be more independent? Is this an opportunity for me to be more mindful, because we all know that, you know, we only have this moment that we have right now. But even just asking yourself that simple question of, is there an opportunity here, even if it's a really small one, and can I do something about it now?
Yeah. One great way to start getting in that developing that new normal or life after loss is really getting in tune with our values. Dr. Judy has a great way to do this. Can you explain values-based living and the values card sort? I don't even think you need to explain the card sort, because I think we have a clip for that, Dr. Judy. But let's what is values-based living? Let's start there.
Yeah, so values-based living is all about living your life in accordance to the things that you think are the most important that defines you. And it's the way that you want to be talked about when you're not in the room, and how you want to be remembered when your time on earth is finished. And these are not things you can check off like goals, but they're essentially directions that you can choose to move in or not move in at any given moment of your life. Examples of values are things like integrity, spirituality, community, adventure, knowledge, and so on. And notice that you can't really check that off, because if you love adventure, you're not going to probably get to a point in your life where you say, well, that's enough adventure for me. Your view and definition of adventure might change given what you're dealing with at the certain time, whether or not you start to be more limited in your mobility, for example. So maybe you used to be an avid rock climber, and now you can't really rock climb as much, but you can still hike, you know? So your definition of these values may shift over time, but usually people's top values tend to stay relatively the same over a period of time. And then sometimes when there are changes in your top 5 or top 10 values, it's because there's something going on in your life that really brings a specific value to the fore. So I've heard for some people that once they've had an illness, now one of their top values is health, whereas before they kind of just took it for granted, right? But the idea of values-based living is, no matter how deep in the grief you're in, and how sad you're feeling, how anxious you're feeling, there's always a way to still move towards your value directions. So many of us will say things like, well, when I feel better, I'm going to do X. But then you're just basically waiting for your life to begin. So this idea of values-based living is, even if you're in the middle of suffering, you can still live a values-based life. And of course, the uh, great benefit of that is you'll actually start to feel better and actually have more joy and feel there's more meaning in your life. And it's not really because you're trying to do that on purpose. It's just that when we live in accordance with our top values, those types of feelings naturally follows, and then that fuels other actions that will improve how you feel.
Yeah, excellent. I love values-based living and the values card sort. Let's go to that clip, Wade.
Values-based living is really important because when we're feeling hopeless, when we don't know where to go next, when maybe we haven't been doing our best at checking off things on a list on a day, can you still feel good about the day that you've had? And that is going to come down to whether or not you lived your day in accordance with your top values.
We're back with Dr. Judy talking about one of my favorite topics with Dr. Judy, which is all about values-based living. Dr. Judy, why is it so important for our quality of life to lead with a values-based living model?
Yeah, you know, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because goals and to-do lists. I mean, that's kind of what our culture is all built upon. And of course, we need goals. We need to check off goals. We need to have to-do lists. But sometimes that's being overemphasized at the expense of letting go of our values, what truly should be meaningful to us, how we want to be talked about when we're not in the room, how you want to be remembered when you're no longer on this earth. What do you want people to recall about you? And most people, if they really put themselves in that situation, the list of accolades is not really what they want to be recalled by. It's really about, well, this person was kind, this person was, engaging, this person seemed to really care, this person contributed in this way. And so what are those things for you? And so values-based living is really important because when we're feeling hopeless, when we don't know where to go next, when maybe we haven't been doing our best at checking off things on a list on a day, can you still feel good about the day that you've had? And that is going to come down to whether or not you lived your day in accordance with your top values.
Yeah. So, big question, how do we determine what our top values are?
Well, there are thousands of values. So there is no right or wrong answer about what your top values are, but a great place to start is with a values card sort. I've created essentially a hands-on activity where 33 of the most common values are listed, but obviously you can add your own to these cards. And then you basically cut these cards out and then you sort them in order of priority for yourself. So usually the way that I like to do it, because there's 33 of these cards, is to try to sort 11 into each column, right? The first column would be your top 11 values. The second column would be the next most important. The third column are the least important. When you do this exercise, a lot of the values are going to sound good to you. You might have a hard time really saying, well, which one is first and which one's second? Don't get too caught up into it because you can always revisit this activity as often as you would like. But once you've isolated your top values, I would say hone in on the top 5. And there's a variety of ways that you can make sure to make contact with your top 5 values every single day.
In what ways can we value our values every day?
So there's a few different ones that I like to do that I think are practical and simple and easy to incorporate into your daily routine. One is just a values checkup at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, run through the top 5 values in your mind and think whether or not in the last 24 hours you've done something in service of each of these values. They can be little things, but as long as there's something that's aligned you with that value. So for example, if one of your top values is community, did you do something to honor a person in your community or to honor an important relationship within that last 24 hours? And if you're having a really busy day, honoring that relationship could just be a text check-in, like, hi, how are you? I've had a busy day, just wanted to say hi. When you have more time, obviously you can do more things, but it's really just about, did you honor or align with that value in some way in this last day? If one of your top values is adventure, okay, well, maybe it's not a weekend and you didn't get to go on that big hike that you were planning, but is there something adventurous that you got to infuse into your day, however small that is? Maybe it's just looking up a new rock climbing gym in your community and thinking about when you might get around to trying it. But that still is a form of aligning with your values. And so that's one great way to do it, is just basically this daily values check-in. A second thing that you can do that I think is really helpful is when you're coming up on a tough decision, and it's really hard for us to make decisions, especially when we're already emotionally and cognitively taxed, when we're going through something like grief. But if you're really struggling with a decision, ask yourself, which of these decisions is going to allow me to honor my top values more?
Yes.
You're not going to have so much buyer's remorse when you really feel confident that whatever you chose is the right choice, at least as far as your top values goal. And then the last thing is just to make sure that whatever goal you commit to, that it's aligned with at least some of your top values. Oftentimes we say yes to things, we're so busy, but we're like, we have to say yes, this matters to me. Does it really matter? Please make sure that you check. Any goal that you commit to, it should be tethered to at least some of your top values. This is going to serve a couple of purposes. One, when the going gets tough, you're going to remember why you're committed to this goal in the first place and why you should keep going. But secondly, you're going to feel more meaningfulness and gratification once you achieve the goal. So sometimes people will achieve a goal, they feel kind of empty, like, well, what was the point of that? And then their band-aid is to just put another goal on the list without checking to see if it's actually even something that they value. So just really making sure that your goal and your values are truly connected.
Well said, Dr. Judy.
Thank you.
one great thing about this course, y'all, is that it comes with a digital workbook and journal that you can use. I think we have some B-roll of that to show you guys. But this digital, it really brings the work into the course. We're not trying to tell you that this course isn't work. It's work. We called it a course for a reason. And so this digital workbook is the companion to the course. So you can watch the videos and then do the exercises right there on your tablet, phone, or if you want to print it out and you can handwrite it. Either way, works great. Real quick, I want to hear from Dr. Judy and everyone in the chat. Just, you don't have to do the value card sort. You don't have to think about it too long, but give me one of your top values. Dr. Judy, what's yours?
Spirituality. I think that that's a really important one for me. And I was actually just having a conversation about this with a couple of people yesterday about how there's so many different definitions of spirituality. And it doesn't mean that it's religiosity. That's actually kind of a different thing. Sometimes it overlaps. But somebody gave me a great definition of spirituality, which is just the search and appreciation of the sacred in life. And the sacred for everybody can be so different. But I think to me, the definition really is about, what is it that you value about this life the most that makes you feel like you're a part of a bigger puzzle, something bigger than yourself. And I feel like so many good things can stream from that once you recognize that.
Yeah.
And for me, a big part of this is also even just going out in nature. Like there's nothing that makes me appreciate how small I am, but also how amazing this world is than looking up at the night sky and seeing stars and things like that. Yeah.
I mean, isn't there truth to that? Getting look, that I don't know how much research has been done in the space, but getting back to nature, even if you're in a big city, just finding some grass or a tree, I think it makes all the difference in the world. In the chat, we have people saying leadership, openness, and innovation are my top values. Love innovation. Haven't heard that one, actually. Very nice. We always hear life is for the living. Well, we're all living. What does that mean for us? Let's take a look at this clip. It's a very exciting part of this process to realize that we're still here. We get to live, and we get to live how we want to live, however we want. Whatever we can do. Even with all of our responsibilities and all of our commitments, we still get to do whatever we want. Yep. Right now, I could end this interview and go watch TV.
Yep.
I get to do whatever I want. It's a thrilling space to go back to, especially after we've been processing so much grief over the last few steps. As we reach the end of step 5, I'd like to take some time to discuss this phrase, life is for the living. Dr. Judy, what does this term mean, life is for the living?
As I've been thinking about this in preparation of us having this discussion, something keeps coming to my mind, which is I used to really love the musical Rent. I still love it. Yeah. But there's actually a song in it, and the last words of the song are no day but today. And that's pretty much what it means to me. It means like all of us only have what's in front of us. And we oftentimes take our time here for granted. So it is really important for us just to embrace the moment that we're in and to make the most of it.
I think the implications of that are far-reaching, meaning they have quite the impact. Everything from causing us to be more grateful, intentionally adding more joy and fun to our lives. We talked about in a previous lesson, but finding that meaning and working it in with our values. It's a very exciting part of this process to realize that we're still here, we get to live, and we get to live how we want to live, however we want, whatever we can do. Even with all of our responsibilities and all of our commitments, we still get to do whatever we want. Yep. Right now, I could end this interview and go watch TV.
Yep.
I get to do whatever I want. It's a thrilling space to go back to, especially after we've been processing so much grief over the last few steps. Can you show us how to begin to draft out a blueprint for the next chapter of our life with this mindset of life is for the living?
I think that, for me, it's really about, what's the one thing today that you want to make sure to impart if this really is your last day on earth? Like, what is the one thing that you can do today that helps you to feel like, okay, you know what? If this was my last day, like I'm satisfied with how I lived it, right? And it doesn't mean that every day you have like the luxury of doing it exactly as if you would if you knew it was your last day.
Yeah.
You might
Sometimes you
have
got to
had
go to the DMV.
right. Yeah, exactly. You might have had a really busy day, run a bunch of chores, but it's like, okay, well, what's the button that I'm going to put on this day? Is it like just telling somebody I love that I love them? Is it just showing appreciation for someone in my life who's done something to help lift a burden? Is it committing to an activity that I know is going to be beneficial for my community and say, yes, I will show up and I will volunteer for this? What's the button that you can put on at the end of your day to say like, yeah, this was a meaningful day for me. This was a meaningful way to wrap up. I think that it's important. It is important to keep that top of mind. And I think also another more long-term strategy is this really interesting activity from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is called My Life's Epitaph. So it sounds very morbid, but essentially you're going to write down what you think your gravestone should say. A gravestone is not going to have like an entire essay. So it's literally like 1 to 2 sentences. So like, what would you like it to say? And then using that as a way to gear up towards like some long-term planning and long-term activities that you'd like to make sure that your life is infused with, because this is how you like to be remembered when you're gone.
I was looking, I go, when is this is going to end? And then I looked right at you and I go, is it in? I'm sorry, I got confused. I was staring
Oh my
at
gosh. And you know what's so interesting is you're wearing the same shirt.
I'm wearing the same shirt, and that was not on purpose.
So sometimes I know I was like, is that like a court? Should I have done that? Anyway, so it makes it hard sometimes. Like I think at one point when you were playing the video until Wade showed me how to see the video progress, I
Yes.
thought you were asking me a question. I answered it at the same time that my video version answered it. I was like, that's just so weird. And I kind of said the same thing. I'm like, okay, that
I was going to say, hopefully it's the same answer.
yeah,
so we know
it's weird because it
consistent
was
and
the
true.
same thing. And I was like, no, that's just a weird moment of deja vu there.
Well, there are so many feelings through the grief process, and one of them is the feeling of good. When you start to feel good again. I was talking to somebody, and they said, it's hard to take care of yourself when you don't have an appetite, when you want to sleep all the time or you can't sleep, and all these feelings. But then when you start to get your appetite back and you start to sleep again and you start to see your friends again, all of those feelings, I mean, that's really, those are the moments where you go, okay, I can breathe again. Things are going to be okay. We have one more clip, Dr. Judy. Let's go to that. I think that's what we have, guys. Sorry, I'm a little unorganized here. But let's go to that clip, and then we'll hear from Dr. Judy, and then we'll end. Things did get easier. Of course, things got easier. Could you imagine if things never got easier? They were just... You get this terrible... I don't mean to laugh, y'all, but sometimes you just gotta laugh. You get this terrible event, this terrible news, this terrible loss. It has to get better, because it can't stay like this forever. It has to get better. Doesn't mean it's going to be as good as before. Doesn't mean it'll be the same as before. Doesn't mean it won't take a while for it to get better, but it has to get better. It has to. I still believe time is the great healer. Time is the great healer, and we can't speed up time, but we can move through it as gracefully as possible. Dr. Judy, thank you for being here today. I would love for you to end into this live stream with any final words you have on grief and the process of people grieving.
Yeah, it's just been so valuable to be with you, Kyle, through this series. I feel extremely honored that we're launching your course series with me. I've been very, very excited about this series just because I think it can help so many people. And I've actually been talking to a lot of people in my community about it. And I just think that there's so much strength in knowing that you're not alone. And oftentimes with grief, we do process it on our own because we have all kinds of feelings about how we should be feeling, how we should be functioning. I know that in a recent grief processing of mine, one of the most recent deaths that I had to process when we were filming this, I was judging myself for my reactions because this was a person that I've known for over 12 years, but we were not necessarily super close. She's been in my life for that long. We work together all the time. But I don't really have a lot of personal relationship with this person. It's not like we go out and have dinner on the weekends. That's not our relationship. She really is a colleague of mine that I really trusted and valued. And I would describe her as a friend, but it's kind of like a colloquial reference that she's a friend because we don't really hang out outside of work. But I had such a significant reaction to it that I judged myself for that. And I didn't talk to anybody about it because I felt like people would say, well, it's not like she's your best friend. What do you think her family is thinking right now? You know, you're having such a deep processing about this. What about the people who really loved her and were in her life every single day? You know, I felt like I had my own judgments about what reaction I should be having. I also didn't tell people because it's so heavy and I didn't want to burden anybody else with my feelings.
Yeah.
So I think I processed so much of it alone. And then about 3 weeks after she passed, a colleague of mine reached out to me and said, oh, I saw that you had posted on, you know, essentially this like internal private website that we all had just to, you know, keep in touch with when the memorial might be and things like that. And she said, I didn't know that you knew her. And so that's how we started the conversation. And I have to say that, you know, after even just having that connection with one person, it helps so much because what she told me was, oh my gosh, I'm having the same experience. I haven't told anybody about it either.
Oh my gosh.
I haven't told my family.
Totally.
You know, I felt bad that I was having such a deep reaction to it and crying every day when I'm not really her best friend. She was having all the same feelings that I was having. And I had no idea this other person was just parallel processing this in the same way. So anyway, don't do it alone. That's why we're here, right?
That's right.
That's the story I want to leave everyone with.
It's a good message. That is why we're here. Thank you so much, Dr. Judy. And thank you for everyone in the comments. I hear your stories. I see your stories. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for being vulnerable right here. I look forward to seeing many of you in the course. Again, you can use the description in the link of this video, or you can just visit medcircle.com. I'm Kyle Kittleson. Remember, whatever you're going through,